in the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching The World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines of the hour. US lawmakers are expected to advance a bill requiring the release of government records on Jeffrey Epstein after Trump's unexpected U-turn. The move comes after up to 100 Republicans signaled they would defy him, making passage of the Epstein Files Transparency Act all but certain. Israel's Prime Minister hails President Trump's Gaza peace plan after the UN Security Council endorses it, saying it promises peace and prosperity. The Palestinian Foreign Ministry also welcomes the resolution and calls for its immediate implementation on the ground. The Kremlin denounces what it calls Russophobia after Poland's Prime Minister accuses Moscow of using espionage in a case of railway sabotage. 2 Ukrainian suspects were arrested today and are accused of aiding Moscow in the incident. A 30-year-old Israeli man is killed and 3 others injured in an attack in the occupied West Bank. The Israeli police said in a statement that a ramming and stabbing had taken place at a junction in the Palestinian territory. China says it has lodged a strong protest with Japan during talks in Beijing as the 2 countries clash over Prime Minister Sakai Takaichi's comments on Taiwan. Beijing says top officials reiterated their objection to what they call Tokyo's erroneous remarks on China. President Donald Trump says he will not rule out sending US troops to Venezuela as he signals he is open to direct talks with Nicolas Maduro. Trump says he is willing to hear Maduro's proposals as Washington warns of further military escalation. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he will urgently convene his cabinet to ensure Israel's behind new West Bank attacks on Palestinians are brought to justice. It follows reports that Israelis torched homes and vehicles in a village or in the West Bank earlier this year. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he will travel to Turkey on Wednesday to push for renewed talks with Russia to end the war. A Turkish source says the US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff will also join the meetings as Kyiv prepares for new proposals. The European Union is welcoming the UN Security Council's vote endorsing President Donald Trump's Gaza peace plan, calling it an important step towards resolving the conflict. EU Foreign Affairs spokesman Anwar El-Anouni says the resolution strengthens the ceasefire, expands large-scale humanitarian access and opens the door for early recovery and reconstruction efforts in Gaza. He adds that the plan also lays groundwork for institution building and reform in the territory. The Security Council vote marks a significant moment in international efforts to stabilize Gaza following months of devastation and humanitarian crisis. Let's take a listen in to the EU Foreign Affairs spokesperson.
The adoption of the UN Security Council Resolution 2803 is an important step in advancing the comprehensive plan to end the Gaza conflict. It consolidates the ceasefire, enables humanitarian access at scale, and opens the way for early recovery, reconstruction, and institutional reform in Gaza after 2 years of devastating conflict.
Of course, this comes after yesterday the UN Security Council voted all in favour of Donald Trump's 20-point plan. It has received praise from around the world, which of course ended over 2 years of war. The first phase is currently in effect, with all the hostages having been handed over as discussions for the next phase to be implemented and discussed terms. However, the UN Security Council, the only real body in the United Nations that has power, have voted in favour of the plan. Now, of course, this comes amid criticism who will be in this international stabilization force in the Gaza Strip, this governing body that is going to take care of the enclave while a Palestinian technocrat governing force is established. Of course, that will take time, and so many countries have offered troops onto the ground. But of course, with the countries where those troops come from is much up for debate. Of course, Netanyahu has responded to this and urged for Hamas's complete expulsion from the region. He's urged regional countries to join Israel in expelling Hamas. Of course, this comes as... Okay, we move on to Europe for our next story. And the Kremlin accused Poland of succumbing to Russophobia following Poland's claims that 2 Ukrainian citizens, allegedly recruited by Russian intelligence, were responsible for an explosion on a railway route to Ukraine. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov responded to the accusations, stating Russia is accused of all manifestations of the hybrid and direct war that is taking place. He added that in Poland, everyone is trying to run ahead of the European locomotive in this regard, referring to the country's position in the European politics. The explosion occurred on the Warsaw-Lublin railway line, which connects the Polish capital to the Ukrainian border. This incident follows a broader pattern of sabotage, arson, and cyber attacks across Poland and other European nations since the onset of the war in Ukraine. Okay. We're now joined by David K. Johnston. He is an American author and he joins us live from New York State. David, thank you very much for joining us. Yep. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Of course, Russia has accused Poland of something that, as it calls, Russophobia. Given the recent actions of Moscow and its espionage activities in neighboring Eastern European states to Ukraine, is this a fair statement coming out of the Kremlin?
No, I don't think so at all. And I think it's further evidence of the ambitions of Vladimir Putin, who's been on the record for more than a quarter of a century that he would like to see the old Soviet Union in a new form put back together, with the satellites of the Soviet era brought under the current Kremlin regime. The overflights in Poland, and various other actions, all are indicative of saber rattling by Putin to further his goals, which began with conquering all of Ukraine.
And of course, David, Poland, a NATO member, we've seen drone incursions into the country, along with other countries like Romania, etc. And this, of course, is a widespread plethora, or an example of Moscow's hybrid warfare within NATO states. How far do you think that Moscow will push actions like this, and will they continue?
Well, I think that the Kremlin will continue testing the edge of the envelope, the boundaries, until it gets some kind of serious reaction. Now, the British and the French, it's pretty clear from news coverage there, are not really prepared to stand up in a serious way if there's a full-scale land war. But there's a great deal of effort underway in those countries, Denmark, Norway, et cetera, to try and limit the aggressiveness of the Putin regime.
And of course, the narrative coming out of the Kremlin, David, is that Moscow has said many times it has no interest in attacking NATO, causing any harm to any NATO nations, making escalation happen with the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. However, do actions like this stay otherwise? And what would Moscow's objective be in causing disruptions inside that alliance?
Well, I don't think you can count at face value on anything that Putin says. Let's go back to his little green men without insignia. when they invaded Crimea, and he said, I don't know who they are. And then later he said, of course, those were my soldiers. What he's trying to do is see if he can break up or weaken the NATO alliance after 80 years. And that's a crucial element in his deciding how far can I push this. The leaders of the little Baltic countries, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, are especially worried that the Russian tanks are ready to roll as soon as Putin believes he can do that without a military response from NATO, where an attack on one under that treaty is an attack on all.
Yeah, of course. And of course, this would, if Poland's prime minister's accusation are correct, this would be actions of the KGB, now called the FSB, the Federal Security Service, Moscow's intelligence agency. Could you tell us a little bit about how they operate, how powerful it is, especially in Eastern Europe?
Well, Russia has never abided by the modern rules of war and the law of war. Russia has always thought it's fair game to attack obstetric hospitals where babies are being delivered in old people's homes and schools, and we've seen this in Ukraine. In addition, of course, Putin has sent agents to poison people in other countries with radioactive materials and in other ways. The Russian pilot who defected to Ukraine, for example, was hunted down in Mexico and assassinated. So there will be more aggressive actions by Putin so long as he thinks there's a benefit to him in the long run. He's not in a position to invade any other country at the moment, but in time he well could be. And as we see with drones, the cost of warfare and the nature of warfare is being radically changed in ways that war colleges will be teaching 500 years from now.
David K. Johnston, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's always a pleasure to get your insight. We now move on and over to North America, and US President Donald Trump has indicated that he is open to authorizing targeted American strikes inside Mexico, a move that would represent a dramatic escalation in Washington's campaign against powerful drug cartels operating across the region. Trump has said that he would be okay with the United States taking whatever actions were necessary to curb the flow of drugs into the country. Trump has remarked a willingness to consider direct military measures beyond US borders, a step that would carry significant diplomatic and security implications for both nations. Dr. Satoru Nagao joins us now. He's a fellow at the Hudson Institute and he joins us live from Tokyo. Dr. Nagao, thank you very much for joining us. How big of an escalation would this be if the US president authorized strikes in its closest neighboring country? It's one of its highest trading partners. What would be the implications of this?
In this case, we should be careful because President Trump said he's replying the question from media that it's okay for me, and but he hasn't said he decided to do that. So if he will do that, it is on something like that, he said. So that's why this is not the situation.
So apologies there, we have some audio issues once again. Apologies to our viewers for that. Hopefully we get Dr. Nagao back once we get that problem sorted out. So, of course, Donald Trump has released statements and said that he is open to striking Mexico due to the war he has made on narco-terror groups, many of which operate out or south of the border of the United States. Of course, fentanyl is a big topic of conversation, quite a lot of which travels through the crossing point in the US border with Mexico and the United States. Of course, Sheinbaum and Trump have a seemingly friendly relationship. Of course, Donald Trump has aggravated the Mexican government with initial tariffs imposed. However, these were later decreased. Dr. Nagao joins us once again. Much apologies for that, audio issues. Can we go back and talk about the implications that a strike from US President Donald Trump would have if he did indeed even if it wasn't on government sites, violate Mexico's sovereignty, like he's talking about?
Yes, indeed, for the President Trump, this is a very serious issue because the drug is in this case smuggled to the United States and create a problem inside of the United States. So for the United States, this is a domestic issue, even if it's an international issue. So that's why President Trump making the pressure to the other country to crack down the drug cartel. And this remark, reply to the media question is, of course, President Trump making the pressure to the other government to make the strong method against the drug cartel. So this is one kind of the intimidation style, but the effective way to persuasion. So that's why we need to be careful the remark of the President Trump. He did not say that he has already decided to do that. But it's okay for me to do that. So that's why there is a possibility he will do that, but he hasn't decided yet. It's the current situation. So that's why there is a possibility it will happen, but not decided yet. Still, this is a part of the negotiation, part of the diplomatic pressure. So in case of the Mexico, in case of the Colombia, in case of the Venezuela, if they crack down the drug cartel very well, effectively, and cooperate with the United States, it will, American attack will not happen. But if they cannot do that, because of this is the issue for the domestic audience of the United States, of course the U.S. has a strong will to do that because voter in the United States is waiting the strong method against the drug cartel, even if they are located in other country, and it will affect the election next year. So that's why this is needed. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Nagao, for joining us here on NewsX World. It's always a pleasure to get your insight. Now we move on, and COP30 hosts Brazil produced a first draft today of an agreement between nations at the UN climate talks after negotiations on the sticking points stretched late into the night. The draft includes a sweep of options on the most difficult issues, reflecting the gulf between the nearly 200 nations in Belém and the work still needed ahead to refine a final compromise. The text leaves open a wide range of possibilities on the flashpoint issues in Belém, trade measures, finance for poorer nations, and global inadequacy of cutting carbon goals. However, EU climate chief Wopke Hoekstra has ruled out revisiting financial pledges after the release of the draft agreement at the UN COP30 summit. Okay, we move on. Now we move on, and Cloudflare has announced that it has fixed the technical issue that led to disruptions across various popular platforms, including ChatGPT, X, Perplexity, and Spotify. According to the company's status page, it had deployed a change that restored some services, including dashboard functionality, while still addressing broader application-level issues. Despite this, many users continue to report intermittent issues with affected services, which included disruptions on major platforms like Amazon Web Services, Canva, and League of Legends. Earlier in the day, Cloudflare had acknowledged the outage, stating it was dealing with an internal service degradation and was working to restore normal operations. Well, that is all that we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.
in the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.